On the morning of November 16th, 1957, in Plainfield, Wisconsin, local hardware store owner Bernice Worden suddenly disappeared. Her son, Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden, entered the store around 5 p.m. to find the cash register open and bloodstains on the floor. Local man Ed Gein was the last person to have seen her in the store, so they arrested him and searched his farm. Upon opening a shed on his property, a Washoe County sheriff saw a decapitated figure hanging upside down with its wrists bound and all the organs removed. Initially, he thought it was a deer carcass. It wasn't a deer carcass. Welcome to history's biggest villains. Edward Gein was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin on August 26, 1906 to George Philip Gein and Augusta Wilhelm Gein. Ed had an older brother, Henry. Augusta was extremely religious, being part of the Lutheran faith. She preached to her sons about the innate immorality of the world, the evil of drinking, and her belief that all women, apart from herself of course, were naturally promiscuous and instruments of the devil. She reserved time every afternoon to read from the passages from the Bible, usually selecting verses from the Old Testament and the book of Revelation concerning death, murder, and divine retribution. She hated her husband, who was an alcoholic who couldn't keep a job, although he worked at various times as a carpenter, tanner, and insurance salesman. During his time in La Crosse, George opened a local grocery shop, but he soon sold the business and left the city with his family to live in isolation on a 155-acre farm in the town of Plainfield, Wisconsin. Augusta took advantage of the farm's isolation by turning away outsiders who could have influenced her sons. Ed left the farm only to go to school. Outside of school, Gein spent most of his time doing chores on the farm. All of this time around his mother caused Ed to develop a weird attachment to her. Gein was shy, and classmates and teachers remembered him as having strange mannerisms such as seemingly random laughter as he was laughing at his own personal jokes. To make matters worse, his mother punished him whenever he tried to make friends. Despite his poor social development, Gein did fairly well in school, particularly in reading. On April 1st, 1940, Gein's father, George, died of heart failure caused by his alcoholism at age 66. Henry and Ed began doing odd jobs around town to help cover living expenses. The brothers were generally considered reliable and honest by residents of the community. While both worked as handymen, Ed often babysat for neighbors. He enjoyed babysitting, seeming to relate more easily to children than adults. Henry began dating a divorced mother of two and planned to move in with her. He was worried about his brother's attachment to their mother and often spoke ill of her around Ed, who responded with shock and hurt. On May 16, 1944, Henry and Ed were burning away vegetation at the property when the fire got out of control, drawing the attention of the local fire department. After the fire was put out, Ed reported his brother missing. With lanterns and flashlights, a search party searched for Henry, whose dead body was found lying face down. Apparently, he had been dead for some time, and it appeared that the cause of death was heart failure since he hadn't been burned or injured otherwise. It was later reported that Henry had bruises on his head. The police dismissed the possibility of foul play, and the county coroner officially labeled his death as asphyxiation. The authorities accepted the accident theory, but no official investigation was conducted and an autopsy was not performed. Take that as you will. Gein and his mother were now alone. Augusta had a paralyzing stroke shortly after Henry's death, and Gein devoted himself to taking care of her. Sometime in 1945, he and his mother visited a man named Smith, who lived nearby, to purchase some straw. According to Gein, Augusta witnessed Smith beating a dog. A woman inside the Smith home came outside and yelled for him to stop, but Smith beat the dog to death. Augusta was extremely upset by this. However, she wasn't bothered by the brutality towards the dog. She was bothered by the presence of the woman. Augusta told Ed that the woman wasn't married to Smith, and so she had no business being there, and angrily called her Smith's harlot. She had a second stroke soon after, and her health deteriorated rapidly. She died on December 29, 1945, at the age of 67. Ed was devastated by her death. He had lost his only friend and one true love, and now he was alone in the world. Something in me really makes me seem like that was karma for her talking about that woman, but that's just me. Gein held on to the farm and earned money from odd jobs. He boarded up rooms used by his mother, including the upstairs, downstairs parlor, and living room, leaving them untouched. While the rest of his home became increasingly squalid, these rooms remained pristine. Gein lived thereafter in a small room next to the kitchen. Around this time, he began interested in reading pulp magazines and adventure stories, particularly those involving cannibals and Nazi atrocities. Gein was a handyman and received a farm subsidy from the federal government starting in 1951. He occasionally worked for the local municipal road crew and crop threshing crews in the area. Sometime between 1946 and 1956, he had also sold an 80-acre parcel of land that his brother Henry had owned. On the morning of November 16, 1957, Plainfield hardware store owner Bernice Worden disappeared. A Plainfield resident reported that the hardware store's truck had been driven out of the back of the building at around 9:30 a.m. The hardware store saw few customers that day. Some area residents believed that this was because of deer hunting season. Bernice Worden's son, Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden, entered the store around 5 p.m. to find the cash register open and bloodstains on the floor. Frank Worden told investigators that on the evening before his mother's disappearance, Gein had been in the store and that he was supposed to return the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze. A sales slip for a gallon of antifreeze was the last receipt written by Worden on the morning she disappeared. On the evening of the same day, Gein was arrested at a West Plainfield grocery store, and the Washoe County Sheriff searched the Gein farm. A Washoe County Sheriff's deputy discovered Worden's decapitated body in a shed on Gein's property, hung upside down by her legs with a crossbar at her ankles and ropes at her wrist. The torso was dressed out like a deer, like the organs being removed. She had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle, and the mutilations were made after her death. Upon the search of Gein's property, they found whole human bones and fragments, a trash can made of human skin covering several chair seats, skulls on his bedpost, female skulls with some of the tops sawn off, bowls made from human skulls, a corset made from a female torso, skin from shoulders to waist, leggings made from human leg skin, masks made from the skin of human heads, a woman's face mask in a paper bag, a skull in a box, Bernice Worden's entire head in a burlap sack, Bernice Worden's heart in a plastic bag in front of Gein's potbelly stove, 9 vulvae in a shoebox, a young girl's dress in the vulvas of 2 females judged to be about 15 years old, a belt made from female human nipples, 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, and fingernails from female fingers. When questioned, Gein told investigators that between 1947 and 1952, that he had made as many as 40 nightly visits to 3 local graveyards to exhume recently buried bodies while he was in a dazed-like state. On about 30 of these visits, he said that he came out of the daze while in the cemetery, left the grave in good order, and returned home empty-handed. On the other occasions, he dug up the graves of recently buried middle-aged women he thought resembled his mother and took the bodies home, where he tanned their skins to make his paraphernalia. Gein admitted to stealing from 9 graves at local cemeteries and led investigators to their locations. Alan Wimolowski of the State Crime Laboratory participated in opening 3 test graves identified by Gein. The caskets were inside wooden boxes, and the tops of the boxes were about only 2 feet below the surface in sandy soil. Gein had robbed the graves soon after the funerals while the graves weren't completed. The test graves were exhumed because authorities were uncertain as to whether Gein, a rather small man, was capable of single-handedly digging up a grave during a single evening. Soon after his mother's death, Gein began to create a quote-unquote woman suit so that he could become his mother, to literally crawl inside of her skin. He denied having sex with any of the bodies he exhumed, explaining they smelled too bad. During State Crime Laboratory interrogation, Gein also admitted to shooting Mary Hogan, a tavern owner missing since 1954, whose head was found in his house. A teenage boy whose parents were friends with Gein reported that he kept shrunken heads in his house, which he described as relics from the Philippines sent by a cousin who had served on the islands during World War II. Upon investigation by the police, these were determined to be human facial skins, carefully peeled from corpses and used by Gein as masks. Gein was also considered a suspect in several other unsolved cases in Wisconsin, including the 1953 disappearance of Evelyn Hartley, a lacrosse babysitter. During questioning, Washoe County Sheriff Art Schlee reportedly assaulted Gein by banging his head and face into a brick wall. As a result, Gein's initial confession was ruled inadmissible in court. Schlee died of heart failure at age 43 in 1968 before Gein's trial. Many knew that he was traumatized by the horrors of Gein's crimes, and this, along with the fear of having to testify about the assault that he did, caused his death. One of his friends said he was a victim of Ed Gein as surely as if he had butchered him himself. On November 21st, 1957, Gein was arraigned on one count of first-degree murder in Washoe County Court, where he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Gein was diagnosed with schizophrenia and found mentally incompetent, thus unfit for trial. He was sent to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, a maximum security facility in Waupun, Wisconsin, and later transferred to the Mendota State Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin. In 1968, doctors determined that Gein was mentally able to confer with counsel and participate in his defense. The trial began on November 7, 1968, and lasted 1 week. A psychiatrist testified that Gein had told him that he didn't know whether the killing of Bernice Worden was accidental or intentional. Gein had told him that while he examined a gun at Worden's store, the gun went off, killing Worden. Gein testified that after trying to load a bullet in the rifle, it discharged. He said he hadn't aimed the rifle at Worden and didn't remember anything else that happened that morning. At the request of the defense, Gein had a bench trial with Judge Robert H. Gomar presiding. He was found guilty on November 14th. A second trial dealt with Gein's insanity. After testimony by doctors for the prosecution and defense, Gomar ruled Gein not guilty by reason of insanity and ordered him committed to Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. Gein spent the rest of his life in a mental hospital. Judge Gomar wrote, due to prohibitive cost, Gein was tried for only one murder, that of Miss Worden. He also admitted to killing Mary Hogan. After he was arrested, Gein's house and 195-acre property were appraised for $4,700. That would be $44,000 in 2021. His possessions were scheduled to be auctioned on March 30th, 1958, amidst rumors that the house and the land it stood on might become a tourist attraction. Early on the morning of March 20th, the house was destroyed by fire. A deputy fire marshal reported that a garbage fire had been set 75 feet from the house by a cleaning crew who were given the task of disposing of refuse. Arson was suspected, but the cause of the fire was never officially determined. It is possible that the fire was not considered a matter of urgency by Fire Chief Frank Worden, son of Bernice Worden, Gein's last victim. When Gein learned of the incident while in detention, he shrugged and said, just as well. Gein's 1949 Ford sedan, which he used to haul the bodies of his victims, was sold at public auction for $760, which would be $7,100 today, to Carnival sideshow operator Bunny Gibbons. Gibbons charged carnival goers 25 cents admission to see it. Gein died at the Mendota Mental Health Institute due to respiratory failure secondary to lung cancer on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77. Over the years, souvenir seekers chipped pieces from his gravestone at the Plainfield Cemetery until the stone itself was stolen in 2000. It was recovered in June 2001 near Seattle, Washington, and was placed in storage at the Washoe County Sheriff's Department. The gravesite itself is now unmarked. Gein's story had a lasting effect on American pop culture as evidenced by its numerous appearances in film, music, and literature. The tale first came to widespread public attention in the fictionalized version presented by Robert Bloch in his 1959 suspense novel Psycho. Alfred Hitchcock turned his book into a film in 1960. He was also the inspiration for the Leatherface character in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. Ed Gein was a socially awkward boy who had a fanatical obsession with his mother. Once she died, he longed to replace her, but his demented actions earned him a sort of infamy in American culture that still exists to this day. And thank you for watching this video, man. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, hit that subscribe button. I'm excited to start this channel. I know a lot of you guys have been wanting to see the documentaries, and I felt like it would make more sense to just have a dedicated channel for these, for those who like true crime, you know, just so I can organize things. But thank you for everyone who has subscribed so far. I appreciate all the support. Please have a great day. Be safe. I'm out. Peace.